So how's everybody doing? My name is Jacob, and I'm going to be talking about native Node.js apps. I'm on GitHub. It's my username for GitHub. I have some relevant material up there, so if you want to go check that out, all my demos will be up there as well. I work full-time at a company called Hone Inc. We make embeddable quizzes and ads and stuff. It's really cool. We have some job openings up on our website. If you're interested, come talk to me afterwards. And then I'm also an ambassador for SendGrid. So you might be thinking, like, what is a native Node.js app? You can almost say, like, isn't all Node.js apps native? Because you can essentially run C code from them. So I don't know how much more native you can get. Well, yeah, they are. They are native Node.js apps. But I was trying to think, like, what should I call these type of apps? Because there's not really like a qualification or like a marketing term for these type of apps. So like, it's not a web app at all, because it does so much more than a web app. It would be kind of degrading to it to say, hey, it's a web app. A native web app is actually a little bit better, but it's not a web app at all, because kind of a web app like implies that it can be ran on a browser, which if you run a heavily modified browser, you can run these apps, but not really on a regular web browser. Node.js app, it is kind of a Node.js app, but like when you say Node.js app, you're usually talking about something like a web server or some type of networking server, or even though it can be a number of things. And then like native Node.js app is kind of lame as well. I mean, I don't like it. I think we can do a little bit better. So like super effing cool way to use web tech to make a native-esque type of app. I like that a lot better. So, but really what I'm talking about is a lightweight version of a browser, and then the runtime of the browser is replaced with Node.js runtime, which is really cool. And I say most instances because there's a lot of choices. Well, not a lot of choices, but there's multiple choices to this. And luckily they're open source as well. So the first one I'm going to talk about is JS.LA. Now JS.LA has been around for a while. It's not that actively developed, but it is very close to a web app. You essentially are running a web app that interacts with the backend, and it used to be called app.js, and I think they changed the name because they're looking to support PHP. I don't know if that's considered a bad thing about this type of app, but and then the big guy that I think most of you have probably heard about is NodeWebKit. It's very full-featured. I've built apps in NodeWebKit. It is very cool. They even have a grunt plugin to pack applications, which is just awesome. Like, you have no idea. It is kind of slow to start up, and there's a number of reasons for that. And actually, I was going to talk about NodeWebKit throughout this whole entire presentation, but then something happened this month, and just for reference for people who are watching this online, this is May of 2014. So what happened is that GitHub released their Atom IDE to open source, which I thought was great. I mean, a new project that's open source, it's using very similar technologies. I've actually speculated with a lot of my friends that they're using NodeWebKit in Atom to build this IDE. But they actually hired on one of the core developers of NodeWebKit to build Atom Shell, which is very actively developed because it's from GitHub, and it acts just like Node.js runtime. It is missing a few key features because really it was just built to run their IDE, and now they're just open sourcing it. So eventually they'll get these features, like for instance, you can't even set like an icon to the app very easily. Granted, you can do it, but you have to kind of hack around to do it compared to like what you can do in NodeWebKit. So before I talk about like how cool these things are, these types of apps, there is some things to think about before you like try to build a production app with one of these. So it's different. I mean, this is with all new technology. It's going to be different. For instance, like things like live reload will not work right off the bat with it. Maybe actually this stuff's being actively developed pretty quick. So there actually might be a plugin for live reload now. But at the time of making this, there wasn't. And like, it's just weird. And like, for instance, have you ever made a web app that you don't have access to the window object? Like, you always have access to that, where you can like just store stuff in there and you can just pull stuff right back out. With these types of apps, you don't have that capability. Sometimes you have it access to window a lot of times though. And then like there's something that we don't have to deal with as web programmers that you have to deal with these type of apps, which is like usually on different OSs. Usually these browsers just work on these different OSs, and you have to worry about, you know, the actual processes and stuff. But you have the same browser, but now you're storing data into different locations. I actually have an app that I built that like I had a friend on a Mac computer that couldn't run it just for some stupid reason. But yeah, that's one thing to look out for. And then actually the App Store, like a lot of people are trying to like release these apps to the App Store. I've heard a lot of nightmare situations where they didn't pass the App Store. And then I've actually heard of a few Node WebKit ones that have, but Atom Shell, I guess there's people trying to do it, but a few of the GitHub employees don't think that they're going to pass. And then it's experimental. Like some of the features that you've used on web and that you've come to love or on Node.js, some of those features just don't work. Like, granted, you can get native plugins to work, NPM modules that run C code, but like there is catches. For instance, like Atom Shell is only running version 0.11.9 is the first version that it came out with. So if you have a native plugin that's running a 0.10, only is compatible with 0.10 versions of Node, you're going to run into a lot of issues because they did a lot of changes with native bindings. But before I bum you guys out, there is a lot of exciting stuff about this app, about these types of apps. And one thing that really excites me is that like W3 standards, they have a bunch of different specs that come out all the time that like are just like experimental sometimes, or sometimes, you know, have been around for a while. But actually these features can be built by just your regular JavaScript programmer, so they can start playing with these types of things right away. And actually what's cool is that you can actually learn these technologies before they even come out in browsers. So when they do come out, it's not something new to you. And then you actually have control over the browser. As a web programmer, there's always been that moment where you just like curse IE8, you know, to all hell, where like something's broken, you don't know why. You actually control the browser that you're running on, which is great, which means you can run, you know, all the cool APIs that browser gives you. It isn't just a Node.js app. It does so much more. Like, it has a GUI that isn't a terminal. I mean, I don't know how many times, you know, a client has asked you for a terminal program that they can play around with, because it doesn't happen, because clients usually want something that's nice and pretty and something that has an actual GUI, not just a terminal program. This is for people who like hate setting up DBs, or they just don't want to do it. It actually has built-in web storage, so if you wanted to actually get up and started without having to set up something like LevelDB or MySQL or SQLite or something, some embeddable database, it actually already has IndexedDB and local storage and all that kind of cool stuff in it, so you can get started really quick. And it has a real DOM. I don't know how important this is to you, but you can actually interact with this DOM and see things happening, where like if you use JS DOM and stuff, it feels kind of abstract. You're interacting with it, but it's kind of, you know, something that is very abstract. And then you have access to native features, and I'm talking about like native GUI features like menus, menu bars, windows, dock, start menu. And actually I have a demo here of a Node WebKit app. And this is a note-taking app that syncs up with Gist. And actually you have access to, so you can see here, I have, you know, access to the file menu. When I like try to switch apps, you see that it's in here. Let me close that. So you actually have access to those types of things, which is great, because like I grant you could probably do that with a regular Node.js app, but you have to hack around to get to it, and then it's like kind of awkward without a window to actually show a GUI in. So all those things were about like like web apps, like what web apps do compared to Node.js apps. So I want to explain why it's not just a web app. So you have access to Node.js's APIs like streams, file system, child processes, all kinds of really cool stuff built in. And I'm not talking about like file access like you would have in Chrome, or file access that you would have like through Browserify or something. You actually have access to the whole file system, which is great. Well, granted, you have the permissions. And then synchronous module imports. These are really great, where you just like require something and it's there. where like I can hear you saying like, oh, whatever, you know, you can actually do this stuff with component IO or browserify. So why is that important? But actually, you have like access to like all the npm modules on npm. Granted, there are some gotchas where like with native modules and stuff like that where they kind of don't work sometimes, but a lot of the modules will work right out of the box. And one thing that's really cool is that you can actually interact with installed programs like Git, Python, or like your keychain or something. And actually, I have another demo showing this. So I'm going to go to my terminal, switch over, and I'm going to go. So I'm going to start up the app. This is actually an Atom Shell app. As you can see, it's showing me like a to-do of like a to-do MD. And actually, I'll go into my editor, and I'll open up this one. Let me bring that back. So let's say I want to check off, like we went to the kitty bar afterwards. So I say that, and then you'll see that it should update. So it updated. So I'm actually interacting with Git here. I'm actually just running a child process to run Git right here. So I spawn a Git process, and then I just spit the output straight to the window, which is really cool because I didn't have to set up WebSockets or anything crazy to get that running. It felt kind of natural, those things just interacting with each other. And then also another really cool thing is that I have access to hardware. Now I have another demo here, and I'm not a hardware guy, so it's just a little bit of a warning. So I have this Arduino board hooked up to a breadboard with an accelerometer on here, and then I have a demo app that I'm going to run. And is anybody epileptic? Because I'm going to change the background color of this thing pretty quickly. Yeah. Oh, actually, real quick, it's going to throw an error. And that is because I need to be sudo to get access to the USB port. OK, so give it a second. It's going to start turning colors. So actually, the wiring's probably off on here because I'm not a hardware guy, but I can actually move this thing around and it will change colors, and sometimes you'll get some pretty colors out of it. But yeah, so I'm actually talking directly to the app from this piece of hardware, which, I mean, I don't know of any web apps that can really do that. And I'm using Johnny 5 and some hackery to get this thing working on Atom Shell. It's kind of a pain to get that kind of stuff working. But yeah, my name is Jacob, and thanks.
Time for some questions.
Would it access a camera on the mobile phone?
So you can't run these things on mobile phones right now, just because you would have to install like an APK or an actual like iOS app. And these things are mainly for desktop currently. So, but you can have access to the camera of the computer. But again, you can do that kind of stuff with web apps as well, with Git user media and stuff like that.
So if you were starting a new project, would you use NodeWebkit or Atom Shell?
Okay, so I should have said this before, but the main difference between Atom Shell and NodeWebkit is that NodeWebkit, your entry point is like an HTML file. So you essentially you render that HTML file and then you start running the scripts on that HTML page. And that's how you start up a NodeWebkit app. And with Atom Shell, it's different because you have an entry point of a JS file. So you actually start running the JS process, and then you can open up Windows when your app's ready, which is kind of good with like perceived performance, like, oh, it's opening up real fast, but really you're just waiting before and then opening up the app. I would have to say I would probably use Atom Shell. Well, it depends, because if the timeline was like a month, probably Node WebKit, because I need a lot of the features that Node WebKit has. But if, let's say, it's like 6 months, Atom Shell probably will catch up in terms of like the nice features like icons and stuff like that in 6 months. So I would probably, for a longer project, pick Atom Shell.
It's written in CoffeeScript.
Oh, yeah. That is the down part. But luckily, you can interact with it with JavaScript. Right here.
I think this is probably not a fair question for you, but I've been using Atom Editor, and UI-wise, visual, it's awesome. I love it, but performance-wise, it's really sluggish.
Yes.
Can you speak on that at all?
So you're essentially, you're not completely native. You're still running a web browser. You're dealing with all the rendering of a web browser. I mean, it's the same performance issues that you would run into with a regular web browser. Right now, it's not completely optimized, and I don't think there's, there's stuff that they can do eventually to optimize that, but I don't know.
I guess I'm just, like, it's almost a proxy question for you. I want to ask GitHub, but, like, are they aware of it?
Yeah, they are aware of it. Actually, I saw recently they pushed a big update for scrolling speeds that's supposed to improve the scrolling speeds. Actually, I have a Linux box, so I haven't really had the royalties of getting to use Atom, the actual IDE, until recently. So, yeah, I think they're doing stuff to make the performance a little bit better, but it's still not completely native.
Thanks for
trying.
Can we see the code for the hardware?
Yeah. So in the hardware, I just require the app. Here, let me blow this up a little bit. So I require the app, and then with Atom, they have like this browser window. And then this is Johnny 5. It's just a module that I had to install. And then I just make a new board. When the board's ready, I make an accelerometer, which is talking to this thing. And then when the accelerometer inputs change, I emit an event. And let's see, we scroll over, accelerometer change, and that just sends out the data to that event. And here I'm just opening up the window when the app's ready. And then actually the HTML file, so you have to do like background require remote, and then as you see from the background, I can require the app. And then in here, see, this is converting it all. And right here, I listen to the change event. So I grab the app and I look for that Excel change, and then I handle the change, which then does some conversion stuff to make it a little bit more like RGB than it comes out as.
We got time for one more.
Right here.
So I guess given some of the like cross OS compatibility issues, like what would be the primary use case for this? Like when would you say, yeah, we'll use Node WebKit rather than just we'll build a Node app and we'll tell people to run it in WebKit?
So I think the main use case is when you need something that's you want to build like a Node app that has some good performance, and you want to write Node code, but you also want access to some modules that you can then like pull out Bluetooth or some technology that's just not quite there. Plus, like, for instance, I referenced the service worker API or spec that's coming out, and like they're gonna do a lot of like network proxying and stuff with that to make like caching really good in a browser. But with like this type of stuff, you can already do like those types of things to where you can have really good caching and really good, access, really good like access to cache assets and stuff. So I would say like if you're doing something with hardware, it's a definite go, because I don't know when you're ever going to be able to like connect up a USB to an Arduino board and then run like a web app. But besides that, there is a lot of cool things about it, but really there's not too many differences from the web platform, which is kind of nice in itself, because then you can have very similar code bases if you wanted to make a web app and one of these kind of like native-esque apps.
Give it up for Jacob.